you, Program Director. It's a long presentation, I must say. I didn't think I would be given 20 minutes. I'm grateful for the invitation from the SAASTA. When they told me that they would like me to present here, they said they would like me to give a plenary lecture. And as a professor, plenary lecture is at least 45 minutes. So, but however, I'll have to, follow the steps of the previous speaker and just, pick up some points from my presentation, which I think will be, will give the message that I want to share today. Indeed, I'm the CEO and founder of a company that's based inside Mintech in Johannesburg. We are a carbon company, nanostructured materials, which we supply to industry. A startup company which we hope to grow to a company that employs hundreds of thousands of people in the future. So what I would like to talk about today really is just to give a background on some of the challenges that we would like to solve, especially those associated with the fourth industrial revolution, and of course, we as a country. Then of course, I would like to talk about the role of the fourth industrial revolution in helping us address some of the global challenges that we face. And then, of course, I would like to talk about nanotechnology, its role within the context of the 4IR. And then I'll talk about the skills and challenges that we need or that are required to overcome some of the challenges, especially in relation to commercialization of nanotechnology innovations. And of course, I would give an example of some of my company, what we do, and what perhaps one could take out of that. So really, it's not a surprise anymore that we are facing serious and formidable challenges that relate to a whole lot of issues that affect our lives. And of course, these have been listed in the United Nations UN Development Goals. And of course, South Africa on its own has its own areas which they've identified to be challenges that are facing our society. And of course, I would like to point out that some of the challenges which my presentation will sort of focus on relate to, for example, sustainable development, climate change, clean energy, and of course, other issues that relate to science and technology within the context of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, while we identified quite a myriad of challenges, the issue here is that the problems that we faced nowadays really are not just simple challenges. They're not simple problems. A classic example is the problems that relate to, for example, to water. If you talk about water problems, you have to understand that water does not exist on its own, or it does any problems that are associated with water. They have a bearing on other important aspects of our living. For example, that's why here I give an example of the connection of water to energy in food in what we call the water energy food nexus. Now, this nexus here simply says that it shows that water is needed to generate. You need water to generate energy. At the same time, you need energy to supply water. And you also need water to produce food. At the same time, food can be used to transport water. Likewise, energy is needed to produce food and food. So this is a complex problem. So if you have to solve a problem here, you have to consider the other impacts that are associated with the problem. So if you have to develop a solution or come up with a solution to a problem, you have to work in the bullseye. Now, a classic example here in South Africa, the way in which we produce energy, for example, this is just to show that how we initiate the problems are initiated, such complex problems. For example, we produce electricity from coal, and coal is known to produce greenhouse. The way in which we go about it, burning the coal, for example, we produce greenhouse emissions which contribute to climate change. And climate change ultimately results to droughts and catastrophes which affect the amount of water that we have access to. And if we have no water, then of course we don't have water to produce the energy. And of course, climate change also has a bearing on food, because if there's no water, droughts and everything, there's no food. So this is a complex situation, and our approach to solving these problems really need to be different. Here I just show that indeed, besides the pollution of water and other things, South Africa, if you look at this slide, South Africa, if you look at our freshwater availability by 2025, you will see that we will be our scarcity will be similar to the countries in the Middle East, for example. So it means that, in fact, we will be a physically water-scarce country. Just another example that relates to water problems, for example. Besides the scarcity, the quality of the water, this is a picture that I took in 2006, and the situation hasn't changed to date in Mpumalanga. Why? Because in as much as we are able to do research, and as professors or as businesses, we are unable to eventually, at this stage, solve the problems. That's because our approach to finding solutions to these problems is wrong. In fact, our solutions don't have the kind of impact that they have because we use the same conventional ways. For example, the classical way of a researcher, for example, is that, for example, here it's just showing a cartoon of a professor who has created a very innovative solution, but they're still looking for a problem to go with it. So the people here just come up with because they're able to do the research, there's the resources, the money to do the research, but they don't address the specific problem in the way that they should approach the problem. So that's very important. So as the previous speaker said, we need to be innovative, and our solution needs to be cost-effective, sustainable, and of course, the right kind of skills are critical for this. Now, I'm not going to talk about what the fourth industrial revolution is, as has been explained, but in my definition, the fourth industrial revolution is an era, it's an era of industry and technology revolution that is characterized by cyber-physical systems or technologies that seek to improve the ways of living. So it's just an era, the fourth industrial revolution. It's an era, it's not a technology. But it's what we do that makes up the fourth industrial revolution. So I'm just going to skip this slide here because it was trying to explain more. But perhaps if you just focus on the bottom part of it, is that the 4IR, which is, involves cyber-physical systems, as mentioned by my predecessor, it's got all applications in communication, energy, infrastructure, healthcare, etc., water, for example. And of course, these are just some of the technologies that make up the fourth industrial revolution. I highlight the nanotechnology because I was invited to talk about nanotechnology amongst other things, but I would like to show an example in blockchain technology, for example. It's just another example of fourth industrial technologies, and I just took this from the internet, where a crypto-based company based in Germany is actually launched what you call a cell phone which will involve communication over the blockchain. So instead of using the normal signal that you would use for communication, cell phone, mobile communications, it's actually different things. ATMs that are based on cryptocurrency have been launched in Germany and the USA. So these are some of the developments, and if we actually are unable to come up with the kind of skills that will actually help us to live up to the pace at which the world is developing within the context of the 4IR, then we'll suffer from brain drain, and of course we'll always remain as the underdogs. But that's not what we want to achieve. So nanotechnology divination here, I'm not going to waste much of your time here, but it's just if you have science, for example, science and technology, for example, you introduce the nanoscale, then you have what you call nanoscience or nanotechnology. So it simply means that it's the application of nanoscale science to technology, to commercial, to all all kinds of technologies that we are able to do. So it really involves manipulation of matter at the nanometer scale in order to create materials with the new properties of function. So it's the way in which we are able to create materials atom by atom to form new materials which are functional, which can do things that conventional technologies or things that we have not seen before. Just to show you why nanotechnology, why I had to talk about nanotechnology, it's very important for South Africa. So South Africa participates in the European Commission's Horizon 2020 program, which is essentially a funding that's available to researchers to develop technologies. And South Africa, and so each country that participates in the Horizon 2020 program has its flagships. And South Africa's flagship there, if you look down there, is actually nanotechnology and marine. So these are the key technologies which the Department of Science and Technology actually pushing to get their kind of funding. So South Africa has actually gotten some funding to advance nanotechnology within the context of the 4IR. So what has been done in South Africa, I'm going to be very brief with this. We've done lots and lots of research, which has resulted, I'll be done, thank you. Lots and lots of research, which resulted to lots of publications and lots of postgraduate students. But we've done some innovations, so that some innovations have come out of that. And of course, that's resulted to few patents and some few prototypes. But there's very little spin-offs and very few companies. So this is with just focusing on nanotechnology. So you'll see that the numbers are actually going down according to what we are capable of doing. So the challenge really is that there is an imbalance in this, or rather that we do things in the wrong way. So there's an imbalance of skills or the wrong approach to do things. Otherwise, these should actually be equivalent. If you do lots of research, we should have ideally a lot of innovations, patents, and of course that results to companies that would create jobs. So what does this mean? So I'm talking this in my context as a research professor, for example, the kind of skills that I develop or train my students, for example, that is in research and innovation, writing skills, analytical skills, problem solving. And this is more theoretical or lab scale, present and training students. So these are the kind of skills that we have. But what you need really for your research to have impact, because you want to solve a problem, a real problem, and it must have impact. For example, and what I mean by impact is that if I come up with a technology, for example, let's say I come up with a technology to purify water, what would be considered to have more impact? Would it be a technology that can solve problems, water problems, to millions of people living under power purchase parity, for example, of $5 per day, or that technology that is just developed to replace water purification technology in an urban area, just to replace an existing technology. So you want to, but the research that we do right now is we want to replace that which exists. And the impact there is just enriching and, pleasing those that are already having access to clean water. But we forget that the impact that we need is that there's millions of people that don't have access to clean water, for example. And the skills that are missing, for example, in my case, I had to train myself to become entrepreneurial or to understand business, or to even understand and manage innovation and technology. So those are the skills that are missing when we train our students. So the problem is an imbalance of skills there. And of course, the other problem that we have, that even if you're an entrepreneur, even if you have training as an entrepreneur, you have the skills of business, you still have to face the innovation chasm with your innovation, because there we create an innovation and you show that it works, but it just gets attraction of a few people, and it ends, by just being a shelf, type of innovation, and it doesn't go to the market where it can generate the kind of impact that it would. So we have a problem there, the innovation chasm. So what I think, what we should consider, and these are the things that are approaches that would work. I could have given quite a number of them that I've sort of seen in my capacity as the nanotech contact point in South Africa. Now, what I suggest is that we have public-private partnerships are things that work elsewhere. In Europe, for example, in the Horizon 2020 program and other programs, you see that programs that have an impact, programs that result to successful SMEs, are programs that are made up of two components that involve, or rather, public-private partnerships. And there, what is critical is that you need to have the public sector, people have said that the public sector is important. For example, government can provide infrastructure, that is much needed. Because if I have an innovation, but I don't have the infrastructure, then my innovation can be meaningless. For example, if I have a water technology, innovation in water that can purify water for people in the rural communities, but the infrastructure is not there, then the impact it won't be generated. And of course, it's important then that the government works with the private sector, which comes up with the solution innovations. And of course, the students and the innovators come from the university sector. And of course, you work with the people that identify the needs. The problem is in South Africa, there's a very few of these PPPs that involve academics, very few of them. I can name one, for example, that I know. Maybe others know more. TRIP is one that I know. But the magnitude of TRIP is actually, it's actually quite small scale type of a PPP. And then, of course, some information that I've picked up is also that a majority of this government so far reported that they have supported 33 PPPs since 1999, and others are others that are under review. They do not involve SA innovators. They don't involve the good mix of academics or researchers, people that can provide the innovation and the skills, because you don't want to have the gap of the transferation of skills to the actual industry. So that's where the critical thing is. And of course, this is the way in which it works in the Horizon 2020, for example. This is just one program on robotics where you have the public, you have the public, which is the European Commission, you have industry, and you have academics. This just works successfully. So just about us, SabiNano. So our company, how we started in 2007. I'll show you why this is important. We started in 2007, but we only got to establish the company in 2018. That's when we got funding from the IDC. Not because we couldn't, but because of the system, the way in which nobody bothered to actually help us to move from 2007 when we registered the company. So it had to be a hustle and find a way. So it essentially got choked until we had to work our way until that got funding. And our idea was to make and sell carbon nanotubes, just carbon nanotubes. Comparing it to cement, for example, is a very useful material, solves structural problems. Some of you are not aware that sand is a finite resource. We'll run out of sand one day. If you keep using sand to build, you can come up with other materials. Come up with other materials that can do a whole lot of things there. So with that, I would like to thank you. These are just some of our projects, but let me go to the last slide and show you that we are indeed a company that's existing based in Johannesburg. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry.